it's kind of funny because this podcast is titled Live Graphics for All, and we ended up on this topic.
If that was true, that open things are bad and people will ruin it, we wouldn't have Wikipedia, because the tooling, the platform itself has become so capable. So more and more people have started to try out things like, could I do this? Could I do this? Could I do this? Like, I consider all the screens that I see, I have a bunch of screens around here, I consider all of these renderers.
The first question, what is SPX Graphics and who are you?
All right, easy question. So let's start with SPX. So SPX is a software for media production that you can do graphics, live graphics during live streams, live TV broadcasts, sporting events, corporate events. What have I missed? Video calls, webinars. Yes. So that's what we do as a company. So SPX Graphics is really a specialist company for real-time graphics, and our specialty is HTML-based graphics. So that's what we do. So it's software plus services.
Right. And yourself.
Oh,
who are you that you're doing this SPX Graphics thing? Right.
So I have been doing broadcast graphics for about, over 25 years anyway. And I have worked with broadcasters. We are based in Finland, so I have worked quite a lot with local broadcasters, commercial ones, public ones, media production houses, publishers, and so on. And I started actually as a graphic designer. So I was doing 3D animations and such for advertising purposes. And then I happened to stumble across an open position in one of the TV networks as a news graphics designer. So I joined that company, and I started to do real-time 3D animations for newscasts. And I did that for a while, and then slowly over the years I learned the tools and practices and philosophies and workflows. And I started to go into industry events all around the world. And slowly, one day I realized that, I'm actually a broadcast graphics specialist. So that I never planned for it; just happened. And then I worked overseas for a while, and then one day I started to tinker more with software, since I have done different kinds of workflows and automations when it comes to graphics. Like, you don't always have a group of people to be able to enter content and play it out during a live show or a newscast. So some of these things will need to be automated. Like weather is an example of that. Mm-hmm. That weather graphics, like there's a big, huge, massive computer someplace which is harvesting data, and it's doing all kinds of modeling, and then it just basically churns out a bunch of numbers. And those numbers will need to be turned into pretty visuals for TV. And when I started to do that, I started to do more and more programming work. And now it's half and half. So half design, half programming, development, workflows, and consulting around those things in media production. So,
right, like when I started live graphics, I also got in from the web design side. Yeah. So I had no idea. I mean, I'm still kind of new to live graphics, but I think it's kind of an interesting place where different designers and web people and coders and nerds come in. And kind of merge together and doing this thing called live graphics.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And it's pretty niche yet, or I don't know, I don't know how big of a industry it is. Mm. And that's what I want to kind of talk about today.
Yeah.
So that's SPX Graphics, right?
Yeah.
But the big thing about it is live graphics. That's the bigger scale topic, and you could say it's an industry, right?
Yeah. Yes, you could. Absolutely.
An industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like for someone that has no idea what live graphics are,
Yeah.
maybe like the word makes sense to you, but like they don't really know what it is. So what would you say live graphics is, at like as simple as possible?
Right. So that's something which is usually some kind of an event that happens unscripted, and during a live event or live stream or live TV broadcast, and you will need to reflect that thing on screen somehow, and
Mhm.
and that's a set of tools and software and workflows that enables that you can have, like, well, there were just elections in the US.
Right.
So that's a perfect example of it. So things happens in real time in the world, and news organizations are trying to make sense of it, and they have come up with uh, interesting visualizations about data, and that is being produced live. So because nobody can really know what is going to happen in a sporting event, like which
Unless
team,
if it's fixed.
unless it's fixed
Unless
or
if
rigged
it's
even.
Yeah.
So but anyways, like if the home team scores, somebody will need to push a button, and you can see a score bug updating on screen. So that's a live graphic because it happens
Right.
live in real time as you are watching it. It hasn't been scripted or pre-programmed or pre-rendered, as they say. So it actually happens there and then.
Right. So it's different than something like let's say After Effects. I'm sure many people are familiar with that. So that's motion graphics, right? But live graphics is different in that you don't like render before broadcast or production. You have like what we call the template.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, do you want to explain what a template is, or is that too early? Is that getting into HTML?
There's a lot of terminology already to go through there, like terms like After Effects, template, rendering. there's a bunch.
I think our audience will know After Effects.
Yes,
but we
shouldn't. Yes, they do.
We shouldn't get into the template stuff. Let's hold on to that till a little later. I want to still talk about live graphics like more generically.
Yes.
So you mentioned like news and sports, but like what kind of audiences or customers or users are there for live graphics, and like why? I mean, we kind of went through the why too, but there's broadcasters.
Right. So we like to consider, when we are thinking about these things, we categorize them in 4 categories. Let me try to remind myself what those are. So broadcast is one, so TV basically. Then there is streaming. So there's a lot of live streaming going on in the world. So basically live, like Facebook Live is one example. So there's some event going on, somebody has a camera and they are really broadcasting that live to a web-based audience. So that's live streaming. The third one is live events. So you have some kind of a, let's say, sporting venue. Your home team is playing there, and there are screens all over the place. And those screens are showing, they might show advertising, they might show score, they might show leaderboards, weather information, any kind of interesting things for the audience physically there in the venue during that event.
And that's like kind of that's kind of connected to the broadcast of, let's say, the sport event. Like people on TV, like what you see on TV, that same information needs to be brought to the stadium too. Live.
Right. So, and some of that stuff the content might be same, but it may not always be the same. So there are differences. Like some of the information is only being shown to the audience in the venue. Like, where are the toilets? So that's fairly irrelevant to the TV viewers, but it will be super relevant for the audience there on in the venue.
I keep seeing the what is that, like the fan camera, and then there's a graphic of a celebrity, like lookalike kind of.
Yes.
And that's only in the venue on the Jumbotron. But you wouldn't see that on TV, I don't think.
Right. because there are in commercial TV and professional sports, there's commercial breaks on TV, and so they want to keep their fans activated during these breaks. So they quite often in the venue they use these live graphics to do some kind of a stunt there while the TV audience is watching commercials.
Right.
So that's one use of in-venue live graphics. Absolutely. Then the fourth category that we use is these online meetings, Zoom.
We're doing the podcast right now on Zoom. So
yes. So that's what we are doing. So we are physically a bit further out from each other. So we are using Zoom as our platform, and that's one opportunity to use graphics. Like we are using graphics here in this session here, but like businesses and brands can use also real-time graphics within Zoom. So it doesn't just have to be the typical like virtual background that you have. Like
right.
That's one option, but you can still use live animated graphics like within your Zoom experience as well.
And that's kind of like the newest addition. I don't think people really know that you can use live graphics inside of, let's say, Zoom or any other video conferencing.
Right.
I think it's like a niche of the niche. So there's live graphics and then there's like live graphics for video conferencing.
Yeah.
But I could see that growing in the near future as everyone's, moving on there to do any kind of calls or meetings or podcasts or making content on it too.
Right. People don't like graphics is one of those things that you really don't pay attention to it until you do. And like when you start to see graphics, real-time graphics that is, used somewhere, you will start to pay attention, and then you will start to come up with ideas like, oh yeah, interesting, that I can show, like, let's say I could show like the real-time clock on my screen, so it would just tick there and it would notify the others that this guy is actually like in the middle of the night. So because on Zoom you may not realize that the other guy might be on the other side of the world. So that's like one of those things, just a tiny little thing, a real-time clock in there, because you cannot really pre-render a clock or use an image to represent a time, real time, like a clock. So that's one of those use cases to really have live graphics being used in a meaningful way, even something like Zoom.
Yeah, I feel like when it's done wrong is when you notice it. So you don't notice live graphics until there's something wrong.
Yeah. Yes.
And you don't want that to happen. Like,
of course you don't. Right. Yeah, of course. But once you start to see those issues as well, it's one of those things you cannot unsee. Like you can start to pick up things like typos or things like these, because there's, at the end of the day, there's still some person. Still, like AI is coming and so on, but still there's a person who has filled in a template that we will mention shortly. And
there's
people
a sweating graphics operator if they mess up.
Exactly.
If you ever see a wrong, there's someone panicking in the control room. Yeah,
there is actually. That's good that you brought it up. There is actually a person whose job is to do that. So
right, we should probably talk about that. Like, it just doesn't. None of these, even the one you're seeing here, it doesn't just happen automatically.
No.
At least right now.
And Sandra, hit the button and let's see something. Right.
Give us something. Oh. Yeah.
Good. So that was an example.
Operated by our operator.
Right. Yes. So
I'm panicking right now.
He's sweating. It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. So, but absolutely. So there are these things like mistakes will happen. You might, because some of these things like elections is a good example another time here as well. Like you might have a broken source, so that the data that you're actually receiving that you should really visualize, like if you're expecting a number, like you should show a pie chart, and the pie chart has two items in it or two sectors in it. the blue and the red one, let's say. And so you're expecting to get a number, let's say 60, 40, which adds up to 100. But if you are getting numbers which are like, let's say 5,003, so then it's pretty difficult to figure out that what is the percentage between these things, because it doesn't really, it's in a wrong scale, which means that there's something wrong in your pipeline. And these are the things that graphic designers and graphic specialists, when they are working in these projects, they try to foresee these problems and build in all kinds of safeguards that if this happens, that you can survive the situation. Like you can disable the automation and you can start punching these things in manually. So that's one of those things which people who doesn't really work in live graphics doesn't necessarily think about, that you will need to consider all kinds of scenarios when it comes to visualizing this content.
Yeah, like when I started working in this field through live graphics, I got into like these control rooms, or live, I guess, broadcasting control rooms. Is that
Yes.
the right term? I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like a war zone in there. Everyone's so focused, like everyone's trying to make sure that they're not the one making the mistake. So
Yeah, of course.
it's a very intense room in there.
Yeah.
And so much thought goes into these graphics that you might not notice, but
Right.
it does add a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep thinking about this phrase like graphics are hard, because there are so many things going into it. Like, once again, if we talk about broadcast, i.e. TV screen is 16:9 in aspect ratio. You might have more or less pixels in your canvas, in your area, but it's still 16:9. That's its shape. That's a standard.
Right.
But when you move from one resolution, let's say from HD to 4K, which is like 4 times the size of the amount of pixels, you may not think about how do you want to utilize that space. Like if you think about, like, traditionally people have used pixels or points to describe the size of text on a piece of paper, right? The piece of paper is has a fixed size, and it's very like easy to use these numbers to describe a size of a text on a piece of paper. But if you try to use the same properties on screen, then it might happen that if you have, let's say, 20 pixels tall text in HD, and then when you take that 20 pixels on a 4K screen, that becomes relatively quarter of the size. So you will need to think like, how should my graphic work if they happen to pump the resolution of their production from 4K to from HD to 4K. So what should happen to my graphics? Should they scale up linearly? So it would occupy the same portion of the screen, or should it stay as small? Like when you consider the pixel sizes, should it stay as small, or should it be something in between? So this is one of those things that makes live graphics, or creating these tools for graphics operators to generate graphics on the fly, it makes it pretty difficult, because you will need to consider all kinds of variables.
Yeah, and you don't really know what the end viewer is watching it on too, so maybe that also affects what kind of graphics they're seeing. Right. And you have to consider that too. Yep. And maybe they're watching something on a phone, and then that's a whole different story.
Yes. Yes.
Like if they're watching, vertically, that's not even the same aspect ratio.
Exactly.
So
yes. Yeah.
Gets pretty complex at that point.
Right. But since like I mentioned that we are specializing in HTML graphics, and one thing that that actually sort of like helps, or at least gives an opportunity to consider designs and implementations that actually will scale and will adjust to the aspect ratio and size and orientation of your screens. Like I mentioned, that broadcast is standard in 16:9 aspect ratio, but like one of our industries that we are working with is events, and quite often in events you might have a super wide screen behind the stage, and then vertical screens at the end of the stage. So we can consider a piece of graphic design that can work either way. So we don't even need to know if the graphics operator decides to take that graphic on air using the wide horizontal screen or to the vertical one. So then HTML as a platform enables that, because our systems will identify the size of the screen and can adjust the graphics accordingly. So
that's the future of live graphics that we'll get into. You're skipping over. We have to talk about still that current state, but we will get to it. Yeah. But I guess like totally wrapping up this live graphics. What is live graphics? It's kind of complicated, is what it is. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely, it is. And if you're aware of this Dunning-Kruger effect, which is psychology, which basically states that a thing that you don't understand anything about feels trivial to you, but once you start digging into it, you will realize that there are more variables and more like things which makes it more complicated. So the more you do it, the more you realize that you didn't understand it before, and if in the end it can become kind of complicated.
Complicated is what it is. I think. Okay, so now that I hope everyone kind of understood like the basics of live graphics, I want to kind of talk about the current state of the live graphics industry. So I was asking before if the industry is that even like a thing, a live graphics industry, or is it kind of part of like the broadcasters right now?
Yeah, so I would say that it's part of separate industries. So I wouldn't, well, you can consider it in some fashion, you can consider that an industry of its own, but I would still categorize it that it's sort of like a part of different fields, because those fields have their own, like manufacturers. Different manufacturers supply products for different industries. And within these industries, there are different live graphics solutions. Like one example that I just came up with, like in my head here, is like those, what do you call those? In cars, you have these like meters. What do you call those? What's that? A dashboard.
Speedometers. That's for the speed only, though.
Right, but you know what I mean. So this whole like
the heads up.
Exactly, that's the whole thing. So those are actually live graphics. So when you press on your accelerator, the needle goes up. So that's a live graphic. But I wouldn't consider us being part of that industry. Right?
You mean like the manual ones with the actual needle? Is that what you mean, or like
No, I mean the digital ones, the current ones. Ones. So there are applications and software to be able to do those things, like for screens. Like in your coffee maker, you might have a screen that's a live graphic in there. But I wouldn't call us to be specialists in that industry. Right. Actually, I have no clue how it works. But I can identify that, like there is, like in my coffee maker, there is this little progress bar which tells me how much there's water in the container, and stuff like that. So that's a live graphic, but we don't do that. So that gives me a hint that the graphic design or live graphic design is industry dependent. I would say, and
it's like wide. Across industries, there is a little like bar of live graphics in many industries. So.
Yes, and quite often they still use in the beginning of their workflow, they might use similar tools like to design these things and draft them and show that to their clients, like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Which one is better? Like, but then when you actually go into the implementation phase, then it will factor in all your industry requirements, like what kind of tools you will need to use to be able to make that happen.
Yeah. And is it a coffee machine or a TV or?
Exactly. Yeah. Or like huge skyrise building in Dubai in New Year's Eve when they are doing their projections. That's a live graphic, but it's once again a bit different.
Yeah, there's many ways to like categorize, I guess.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned a second there, you said so there are tools that are used to design these. So what are we talking about? Like Adobe?
Yeah. Yep.
The usual graphic design stuff?
Yes. I would say that quite often, like, there's a bunch of these tools that you can choose between. But conceptually speaking, you have tools which are raster-based, so you're basically painting pixels. And there's vector-based that you are drawing shapes, and you can move those around. And those two different types of tools are used, basically, I would say, throughout any industry which is doing any kind of a graphic design for any purpose. So it starts there, and then starts to drift into its own niche. Like, how do you actually implement that into your workflow?
Yeah, because I want to talk about like, well, what I would call the meta of the graphics industry. So as in like tools and providers, like who's the Adobe in live graphics? But since you mentioned that it's like so varied, like across industries, I'm not sure if it's like even accurate to say there's this one, but we can like, filter it just to what most people probably think of graphics. So like for live streaming and broadcasting. So I guess video content, live graphics and video content. Like what are the big, who's the Adobe in live graphics, would you say?
My brain is trying to find the solution to this question. So, like, let's say, all right, let's split it up in this way. Like, there are traditional providers of tools for broadcast and streaming, at least these ones. Yeah. And those are workflows that starts with a design tool, that they really have like a user interface where you can really animate things, and you can create these designs, and you can add functionality into these elements that they can be played back in a live situation in a meaningful way. That if you have, let's say you have once again elections, so you can create a progress bar or pie chart or something, that you design this in their proprietary animation package, and that package has tools to expose properties from those elements that they can be updated in real time. Like a bar, like if you have a bar chart, each bar is going to have a value. Those values can be, let's say, percentages, and then it opens up this little port behind the computer that when you drop a number into it, it will scale the bar accordingly. So that's like a closed system where you can do these things, and it starts in the design phase. You then load up this design into another software which is able to let you control it externally, and then you have some kind of a tool to do the control with. And so and each manufacturer have their own ways how to execute this idea, but conceptually they are pretty much all the same. And then the other side of this whole thing is open standards. All right, so proprietary and open. And there has been a few open standards for doing graphics in some sense, but nowadays HTML, that we have mentioned a few times, is starting to become a norm in the industry. So there are a lot of manufacturers, vendors who are working in some part of this workflow. We haven't really seen any company to come up with a solution that would provide the end-to-end solution in a single umbrella of tools within one brand. But I think it doesn't have to even be like that.
Yeah.
Because APIs, like we as nerds, we have found ways to build up complex systems by combining multiple applications into one service or one solution by using APIs, application programming interfaces. So a software can talk to another software. And this whole approach is like making waves in broadcast industry as well. So a lot of these big, massive, monolithic applications are being split into specialized segments, and specialized companies are fixing one part of the problem, and then using APIs, they will be able to produce a complete package which are doing exactly the same. But those are like completely two different ways of looking at the same problem.
Right. So you would say like the open standard part is relatively new compared to the monolithic, the big software that does, you can design live graphics, you can play it out with their stuff, but it's, yeah, so.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, I would still call it new, even though it's been around for, let's say, around 10 years. But since HTML graphics are being rendered or drawn in a browser, like you're probably using a browser right now. Your phone has a browser, your TV has a browser, your computer has a browser, all the screens have a browser, but not all, most of them. And those browsers have become more and more powerful. Of course, the hardware has become more powerful, but the software has become really, really capable of drawing things fast on screen. It hasn't always been like that. I mean, you might remember some time ago when you load up a web page, you could see its rough form first. Like if there was a picture, it was a really, really rough, and then it started to like incrementally sharpen up. And so nowadays you don't see that. You really don't see that. Like when you go to a web page, it's like instantly there. That's because you have a faster internet connection, so you can download the data faster, and your GPU, your graphics processing unit in your computer, can process that data faster, and it can draw it on screen hundreds of times a second in some cases. And in traditional TV, we will need to update the screen around 50 or so times a second. So nowadays, this open standard HTML-based workflow is actually, because the tooling, the platform itself has become so capable. So more and more people have started to try out things like, could I do this? Could I do this? Could I do this? And now the technology are already there. So we can like, I consider all the screens that I see. I have a bunch of screens around here. I consider all of these renderers. So in my home, I have maybe, I don't know how many screens I have. Let's say 10, 15 screens all over the place. Different types of screens. Mobile phones. I have a mobile phone here. It has a screen. I consider it a renderer.
I think only live graphics people will consider.
Yeah, exactly.
Every screen a render, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's what it is. Because in this, like, because TV has been around for what? 80 years? It's a long time already. And these graphics, real-time graphics, have been around since early 90s. And from early 90s all the way to recent years, or even today, a lot of these graphics are being rendered on specialist hardware, like a expensive, big, very super powerful computers with super reliable and expensive components, specialized components, graphics cards, video boards, all kinds of physical devices to be able to draw those pixels on screen. But that doesn't have to be like that anymore. I mean, of course, there are still places where you will need these super powerful graphics servers to be able to render your super difficult things, but not everywhere. Like, I think 80% of the graphics that we see on screens could be done with HTML, with the current level of capability built into the HTML specification and tools and libraries that enables all kinds of interesting stuff in a browser.
Yeah, because you said like it started around the 90s, live graphics.
Yeah.
And if you think about the compute that we had available back then, and I don't know if there were browsers. Like, I don't know if that was
no, internet came around what, 92?
Okay. So very early internet. Like people were accessing on their flip phones, their Nokias. So compared to that, like, it does make sense that live graphics is trying to take an advantage of surrounding developments in software and computers and hardware. And these like render specific hardware, is that like, would you say that's partly the reason? Like, if you're watching Twitch or something, they don't have even like a big Twitch streamer, esports. They don't really have as complex of a graphic. I think it's usually like, it's their brand, but it's like just a frame or like a picture.
Yeah.
Like, do you think those are the reasons why maybe a Twitch streamer can't use live graphics, even though they maybe would like to?
That can be one of those reasons. But I think there has been a way how you can do graphics in live streaming for a long time, and that is that you can create an image which has basically a hole in it. It's transparent, and you can put that image on top of your video, and there you go. So that's your graphic or graphics. It's basically a one file that you drop in there, and it might have your logo, your website address or something like that. And then you can change that. Like, you can go from an intro graphic to an outro graphic, let's say.
Right. Yeah.
That you can have a couple of still images, and you can design it yourself, or you can hire somebody to design it for you. So that's one reason that you could survive with just these two still images. Like that could be enough. Another reason is that doing live graphics may require a little bit of workflow or a team behind it.
Right.
Because like here we have Santeri doing our graphics, because we are talking here. We don't want to focus our attention to graphics. So of course there are ways how to simplify it. Like, I don't know if I can pull this up, but like a Stream Deck is a device with buttons in it. So it's fairly simple to just click a button and something will happen. But then again, this button will need to have something behind it. It will need to have some kind of a system which knows what do you mean when you click that button. What should come up? So these things can be automated. They can be made a bit simpler, but I think it's early stages. But granted, there are people who are doing it, and there are services and platforms that enables you to use like a real-time data within your streams. There are systems in place, like when you get somebody donates money to you, you might get some kind of notification on screen. So that is something that you can do, but often those are not highly customizable, or they are part of an existing template collection that you can pick one of designs which fits your brand the most. But I think there are opportunities there to improve it, like the automation side, meaning the control side of things, and then the design side of things as well.
Right. Yeah, they should just be able to use it like easily, like click a button and they have their own branded like graphics up on their screen, because there's so much data, especially if you're playing a game or something. Like maybe the graphic or the data from the game can be turned into a graphic and shown on the screen. Yeah. And the fans can interact with that too. So there is that. So I think we already mentioned a lot of words like HTML, templates. I don't know how many people in the world are aware of all that in the same context. I'm sure I wasn't before this. So I kind of want to talk about the open ecosystem side of live graphics. So I'm kind of coining this section the future of live graphics. You think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think the future has started already. but yeah, we can call it that. So it might be useful to think about the amount of people doing this stuff.
Right.
Like, we know that there are around 25,000 television networks in the world. And if we consider that each one of them has 4 people who are working with graphics, I don't know how fair is that, but let's just go with that. That means that there would be 100,000 people in the world who are doing live graphics for television, right? And those are more often than not, they are using these proprietary tools, which means that there are 100,000 proprietary specialists in the world using those applications. And all right, then we have a number. So then if we compare that to an open standard like HTML, like how many websites there are in the world,
And how many people know HTML?
Exactly. So there are billions of websites in the world, and those are being made by hundreds of millions of people who have learned to use some kind of a tool to be able to generate HTML. It might be WordPress, it might be just coding, like hand coding, traditional way, or using some kind of a WYSIWYG editor that enables you to create an HTML file.
Right.
Basically, that file could be plugged into your HTML-based graphic system, and you could go into production with it. It's not as straightforward as that.
Yeah, that sounds too simple.
Yeah, it's not like that, but it's approaching that.
Right. And so, yeah, can you talk about HTML graphics? So HTML in context of graphics. So first, like, what is HTML graphics, and like how does it work? How does a website, like, how is it that a website and a live graphic that you might see on TV or live sports, how is that the same thing?
Yeah. So HTML is basically a text file, and in this text file there are 3 things. There's elements, then there's logic, and there's style, and we have names for these. So the logic is JavaScript based. So JavaScript is a programming language that you can create programming logic. The elements are HTML elements. They are really a collection of different types of elements that you can render on a page. And a page typically means a text document which has some images and links in it. That's a very rough, like a basic HTML file. That's usually, when you browse through your websites, that's what you see. You see a bunch of text, headlines, links, images, and so on. So each of these items, there are different types of elements. Like you have one element for a headline, one for a smaller headline, one for the body text, one for an image, and so on. So there's a collection of elements, HTML elements. And then there is style, and those are usually called CSS, cascading style sheets, which means that there is a list of things that each one of these elements can look like. Like you can define a color. Let's say that you have text on screen, you can define the color of the text. You can define the color of the background. You can define the size of a font. You can do these things. And by using these building blocks, these Lego blocks, you can come up with stuff. You can create a box which has text in it in your chosen colors and chosen fonts. You can give it position. Like you can say that move left 200%. So there it went out from the screen because it's 200%, like 100% is the width of the screen. 200% to the left means that it's 100% outside of the screen. Then you can plug in your JavaScript code to instruct that element. All right, gradually move over from outside of the screen back to the screen. Stay there for 3 seconds and then move on and move out of the frame to the other side. So there you go. By using these basic building blocks, you can create animated graphics.
Okay. Well, yeah. Sounds well. It sounds like the same thing with the browser. Like you're kind of taking an outside, like software industry technology, but since they made it very open and like powerful, that like other people can start using it for different reasons that, in the beginning, it wasn't made for websites, or it was only made for websites. But I don't know people I have no idea who made HTML. Is there like someone that made it? I don't know. But whoever made it, I don't think they were thinking about putting it on broadcasting or for graphics.
Yeah, that was Tim Berners-Lee in CERN in Switzerland who came up with the
yeah, him.
Yeah, him. Guy. He was the guy. But so that was for HTTP is the thing that you write in front of your addresses. HTTP.
www. Oh yeah, HTTP.
HTTP. That means hypertext transfer protocol.
Right.
So that's what the web is, and so it's transferring hypertext documents around, and that's the protocol which is moving things around over the network. And then the actual page is HTML. And yeah, it wasn't really intended for fancy graphics. It wasn't really. The specification has evolved over the years. So there's an organization, W3, which comes up with who maintains the HTML specification. And they add things into it. Once in a while, there's a new feature. When your browser gets updated, you might have a new feature, a new thing that your browser supports. So there are these versions of these specifications, and it is an evolving target. They try to, of course, because there are billions of websites in the world, they just don't want to break the system that when they release a new browser, all the other websites stops working. So they just try to add gradually like good practices over existing good practices. And these changes over time have made it so powerful that you can really create amazing things in a browser. And if you think about it really, like in those proprietary graphic systems, a software company might have a team of developers creating their own proprietary rendering system for drawing pixels on screen. But if you're working in an open platform, there might be much more people creating these features using the same platform.
Right.
And on websites, when you are scrolling through different kinds of websites, you can come up with really beautiful animations and things and techniques and weird effects and whatnot. Particle effects, lighting effects, all kinds of really amazing stuff. All those can be used in HTML-based graphics because they run in a browser. So if somebody comes up with a, let's say, a 3D animation, something, you can just say, okay, let's try that. Let's bring it into our HTML-based graphics and try it out if it will work. And a lot of times these things actually do work. So there are so many techniques how to do animations in a browser that you are really not limited in any way. Like creating, let's say, pie charts or bar charts or graphs or things like these. There are existing libraries. Library is basically like a collection of source code that you can use as a sort of like a plugin. So you can take this existing piece of software and plug it into your own thing and then utilize it in your own thing. Like you can then create, let's say, a graph fairly easily, even though you don't really understand how it actually draws that line. But if you have a library which knows how to do that line, all you need to do is supply the data to the library and it will actually draw it for you.
Right. But how is this like economically? Like, how does it make sense that everyone's just like kind of giving this to each other? Is that what you mean by that open like platform or openness? Like, why is it that other people are making these crazy technologies? Like super powerful renders, the guy in CERN, right? Like, why did he make that and who's paying him?
Right.
And is he very rich right now? Like,
I don't know.
Is he even alive?
But,
I don't know.
But openness is an interesting topic to discuss because there is a saying like you can go onto a website that it says free software, right? You don't necessarily know what that means because free in English language can mean two distinct things. It can mean free as a free beer. That's one of the sayings. Like it doesn't cost any money.
Don't take your wallet out.
Yeah. And the other one is free as in freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are two distinct ideas. And this is confusing oftentimes. Like openness usually means freedom. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be free money-wise. Yeah. So it might have a price tag on it, but it might be technically open. That once you put it into practice, you can use it for multiple things. You can extend it. You can add your own solutions on top of it. You can modify it. You can share it with other people, and there are multiple ways how to manage this. One of these practices is software licensing. So it's a legal thing, but as a software developers, we will need to understand what these licenses mean. Because if we find a piece of code somewhere on the internet, we will need to read through the licensing to understand how the developer, the person who released that application or software, will allow you to use it. And this is the open part. So there are so much stuff in the world that people are just doing because they enjoy it. They want to share it with others. And they just give it out for free. And one of the things that they might ask in their licensing terms is that just mention my name in your documentation. Like you can use it if everybody knows that I did it. That
for the cloud.
Yeah. So openness is really it has so many upsides that you necessarily don't think at first. One of them being security. Like if you are doing an open source project or if you are using an open source application, you can if you want to do that, you can go to the source code and really see what the software is really doing because you're actually looking at the brains of the source code.
Right.
So you don't need to think like, is it going to steal my credit card numbers or share my details with a third party or something? you can really go into the source code and check it out. And there are
Yeah.
practices in the world how open source communities are helping each other to find these problematic parts of the source code, if it can become hackable, so somebody can do something bad with it. Other people will tell you, like, have you noticed that if you do this trick, you can fool the application to do something odd, and then once the other people they will notify you. You can go back and fix that issue. So quite often open source software is safer than closed source because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes.
And that's counterintuitive.
It is.
It's like you would think the more people and know, like, it's not confined within a team. You would think it's like, unsafer. It might leak, something might leak or something. But in reality, more eyes on the brain of a software is actually more secure.
Yeah. Yes.
So
think about Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Like if that was true, that open things are bad and people will ruin it, we wouldn't have Wikipedia. That's the best technical achievement that mankind has ever done, is this vast library of knowledge. Of course, there are some little details there that some person can go in there and enter false data. But there is a community around it. So if somebody sees that, they can flag it, and over time it gets fixed. So if it wasn't like this, then we really wouldn't have Wikipedia, because if this was true, people would just go there and ruin it if openness wouldn't work.
That's what my teachers thought when I was in like elementary school. No one thought Wikipedia was a legit source, but nowadays it's just like where everyone goes for.
Yeah, and it has proven to be very, very reliable, because there are communities who are making sure that it is being maintained well.
Yeah. So the openness is kind of the first thing you said, is like it's powerful because many people are working on features and like the actual usefulness of whatever it is. And second of all, it's secure and safe. Yeah. Do you have any other kind of like benefits that you can think of, like when it comes to open source or open ecosystems of these softwares?
Well, if we go back to this comparison that I gave with the amount of users, like one absolute benefit in open standards is like you have access to a bigger pool of talent, because you are not using a small niche software which only a few people know how to use and really master. So openness can achieve a wider adoption of all kinds of users, contributors who want to improve your stuff or give you guidance how it could be improved, and maybe create better documentation. It has these benefits.
Right. So it's kind of funny because this podcast is titled Live Graphics for All, and we ended up on this topic. Yeah. I swear it was kind of planned, but not very planned. So, but we did end up here as like kind of a big topic. I want to know, like, what is for like SPX graphics in particular, like how does SPX fit into the whole HTML graphics and this like open system? Like, where does that come in?
Well, time will tell. But at the moment, we are trying to keep everything as open as we can. At the same time, we are trying to be a business, so we just cannot give everything away for free. But what we're trying to do here is we are trying to invite other people to join the party and contribute to HTML-based workflows, because we know that it is going to grow. I'm hoping anyway. I'm believing that it will grow pretty fast, and there's going to be a lot of demand for HTML-based tools, specialists, services, and that's why we have set up like our HTML graphics marketplace. That's sort of like a project in which we try to include external people to come and contribute with their work. That is an ongoing project. It's not nearly done, but that is trying to include other vendors, specialists, if they have anything to do with HTML, that they could share their work through our platform. So that's one. And another one is that we try to find as much partners and integration partners really to work with us to improve HTML-based workflows. So there's a lot of things for different software vendors and service providers to bring to the table. And like I said earlier, that like the more we have users, the more we also will have business opportunities to provide like meaningful services and products to these companies and individuals in the field.
Right. But do we even talk about like what the tools that SPX makes is? I don't know if we did.
I don't think we did.
That was like a philosophy of SPX.
It was. Yeah.
What does SPX even make?
Well,
what is SPX?
Right. So we have basically two tracks at the moment. One is for broadcast and for streaming and for graphics production in media production. So that's the one side of it. The other side is that we are making software to be able to do graphics in Zoom meetings. So these are the two tracks that we have. They have a little bit of different audiences. The Zoom part is for corporations and individuals who are utilizing Zoom in their daily work to do something. Like there could be yoga instructors or financial advisors or banks or any kind of a service company that is using mainly Zoom as their communication platform. So that's one region, and that has a little touch points to broadcast and events, since a lot of events are being hybrid events. So there's a live component and then there's a virtual component. So this has a little bit of overlap, and we have tools to be able to control graphics in other people's Zoom meetings. So we can control other people's graphics and so on. So that's one side of it. But really, the core component, the core application that we really do is SPX Graphics Controller, which is a tool for graphics operator and the whole graphics department to organize their work and use it in production and automate relevant parts of that work. So you might use SPX Graphics in channel branding in a completely automated fashion, or you might use it in live production such as sports.
Right.
Does it make any sense?
I mean, makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to everyone listening.
Hopefully they will tell us.
Santeri, does that make sense? Was that a good explanation?
It makes sense. I'm
Good.
using it right now, I think.
Yeah, so everything you're seeing on the screen is being controlled by SPX Graphics Controller. One question is why Zoom, and why can it be used in other video conferencing?
Yes and no. Zoom has one benefit that the other video platforms doesn't have, at least at the moment. That Zoom has a capability of utilizing a model in which when you render graphic within the Zoom client, it can stream it out with that graphic. Mm-hmm. So this is something that basically it's a compositor within the Zoom. So it can merge multiple layers into one outgoing video stream. So that's a capability that Zoom has that the other guys don't have. But in the other platforms, we can still do it using some kind of a utility application in between. So our graphics are being rendered in a software that can take in your video input, add graphics on top of it, and then stream that out into your video meeting. So it can be done, but it requires a little bit of setup.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. This is like kind of a, not off topic, but one question I had for you. So if a live streamer, someone that is maybe starting out, maybe small fan base or whatever, maybe not even doing it professionally yet, but they're doing live streams consistently, maybe on Twitch or whatever. What would you suggest them as a live graphics setup? Like if you wanna, if they wanna include some kind of live graphics, like do you have a suggestion? Like, you know, hardware, software, like what's the easiest way they can get started with live graphics, would you say, on budget?
Right. I don't want to go into any kind of a vendor-specific solution here.
I mean, you can mention vendors, I think.
Yeah. But anyway, so what you can do is Google for software switcher. That's the keyword. Software switcher. That's the tool that you require. That is going to be the centerpiece of your production. That is going to be an application which can take in your video from your camera. It can take the audio from your microphone. It can play video clips, and it can overlay graphics. So once you have that, then that's the software that you stream out to your destination like YouTube. So that's what you need. You need some kind of a software switcher. Software meaning that it runs on your computer. There are hardware switchers, but don't start there. Start with software.
So software switchers are it's just software running.
Yeah, I can name a few. So there's OBS, Open Broadcast software. OBS.
We're using OBS right
now. We are using OBS. Yes. There's vMix. There's Mimo Live. There's Ecamm. These are both for Mac. There's Top Director, which is for iPad. So there's a bunch of solutions, and on our websites there are actually instructions to some of these that how you can use our graphics as overlays in your selected software switcher.
Right. Okay. Well, I would ask more questions like how do you make these graphics and like more in depth into HTML graphics. But I think we'll do an episode on that some other day.
Yeah, we will have stuff to talk about.
Yeah, this one I just wanted to make it more generic.
Yeah,
kind of like give background and the current and future of live graphics and whatnot. But yeah, I want to dive into like graphics for a video conference. Let's say I want to do a whole thing on that because I think that is going to be big. Hopefully,
yes.
Or I think it's useful for meetings and stuff.
Mm-hmm. True.
But yeah, that's kind of all I have for today. You have any thoughts about this first episode? What do you think?
I'm pretty happy with what we accomplished here. So
that's good.
Let's pat our backs.
Virtually,
yeah.
And as for the podcast, like bigger idea, I do want to have guests on here from the live graphics industry. So it doesn't have to be like directly within, but like even surrounding. So maybe someone making software in live graphics or people involved. One of the 100,000 supposed live graphics people out there. If you want to talk, you can come on here and we can chat. But yeah, anything else?
That's it.
Okay, well, thank you all for listening, and we'll be back sometime soon.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye-bye.